Don't touch that dial. You're tuned in to the Dread Podcast Network.
Welcome to Development Hell. For every horror movie that hits V.O.D, countless others end up D.O.A. Development Hell is the podcast dedicated to unearthing these cursed horror productions. We're going to find out what went wrong, and then decide if these titles still stand a shot at the green light. I am your host, Josh Corngut. I am a filmmaker in Toronto, Canada. This podcast is a proud member of the Dread Podcast Network. Hi everybody, and welcome back to a brand new episode of Development Hell. Today we are going to be talking about Peter Jackson's never-made A Nightmare on Elm Street sequel, The Dream Lover. Today's references and information come from the book Peter Jackson, From Prince of Splatter to Lord of the Rings by author Ian Pryor, and there's also a CBR.com article by Timothy Donahue. Today we have a very special returning guest judge. We've got Tyler Doupe. Tyler, how's it going? And welcome back.
It's a pleasure to be back. And I think you forgot to say back by popular demand.
There, I did. No, I said it. We had you on one of our quite popular episodes, which was Hellraiser 2011 reboot, an amazing franchise. But I'm going to say it, not as amazing as today's franchise, A Nightmare on Elm Street. This is sort of your favorite of all the classics. Is that true?
Yeah, of all the classic horror franchises, as much as I love the Friday the 13th franchise or Child's Play or Sleepaway Camp or, any number of other horror series, Nightmare on Elm Street has always just been closest to my heart. I grew up in the heart of Freddy mania. Freddy was always kind of like forbidden fruit, because just even the mention of his name would drive my parents up the wall. They just, thought horror movies were satanic. And
this is pretty satanic in terms of the horror movie spectrum. But Tyler, before we get too deep into Nightmare on Elm Street, will you do me the favor of reintroducing yourself to the Development Hell audience?
Of course, I would love to. I am Tyler Doupe, and I work as a staff writer at Dread Central, as the managing editor at wickedhorror.com. And I am actually getting very, very close to releasing a book with my co-editor, Sean Abley, on queer references, themes, characters, etc. in the horror universe.
I'm so excited to read that whenever I can. That's really, really cool. And congrats.
Well, thank you. It's the manuscript is due to the publisher by the end of the month. So,
oh God, my condolences.
Thank you. So I've been running around like headless animal of some sort. But
have you been wanting to do a book for a while? Has this been on your bucket list?
Oh, absolutely. A journalist friend once told me in so many words, and I paraphrase, but you're no one until you have a book, or, no one's going to take you seriously until you have a book. And, I don't necessarily agree with that sentiment, but at the same time, it kind of like, lit a fire inside of me. And I was like, well, I want to be someone. I need a book.
Wow.
And, the opportunity just kind of fell in my lap. I started out working with Sean as the primary and sole editor. And, was just a contributor doing a select number of entries. And the project stalled out a little bit and just continued to grow in terms of scope. We finally just kind of came to an arrangement that we would sort of tackle it together as a collaborative effort. And super grateful to Sean and grateful for the opportunity and just grateful to have a book deal. Just to be able to say that is...
it's very glamorous, I have to say.
Very glamorous, isn't it?
Very glamorous, yeah. Well, I'm very psyched for you guys. And I'm also psyched to be getting into the Nightmare franchise, but specifically number 6. And the reason for that is that this Peter Jackson, A Nightmare on Elm Street that I keep talking about, The Dream Lover, was originally developed as the potential 6th installment. So this was going to be after number 5, Dream Child. Why am I getting so nervous? I love this franchise. I know this. I need to believe in myself. Yeah, so this was potentially going to be number 6. Of course, it wasn't. Instead, we got Freddy's Dead. I made you rewatch it for today. But what would you say your relationship with Freddy's Dead is in in the Nightmare universe?
I mean, it's probably like my second least favorite entry with, if we're counting the reboot, that's probably my
Yeah.
least favorite just because it was so, I mean, it was kind of a little bit like the Psycho remake or the Omen remake where, it kind of just did the same thing, not word for word like those two, but the remake just didn't really kind of, do its own thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so that would probably be my least favorite. Freddy's Dead, comes in somewhere before that. And I will say that although I still don't like it very much, I did enjoy it more this time, maybe just because of tempered expectations. It wasn't quite as bad as I remembered it.
This was the time that I've most enjoyed watching it and was probably the most lenient watching it. And I'm kind of excited to talk about that shortly. Today, we're going to be talking about the original Nightmare on Elm Street and the entire franchise. We're going to be talking about Freddy's Dead in the context of when that came out. We're going to get a little bit into Peter Jackson. Who is she? What's she up to? And then finally, we're going to get deep into Peter Jackson's Never Made a Nightmare on Elm Street, The Dream Lover. To start us off, I'm going to revisit our general relationships with A Nightmare on Elm Street. We were talking about that it's a really big one for you, but for me, I would say it's my number one of the franchises. It's so creative. It's so outside of the box. It's kind of unlike the rest of the canon franchises that we love so much. And I think there was always just something really dangerous about Freddy when I was younger. He was the one that sort of seemed to have the highest likelihood of actually coming out of the movie and getting me. And maybe it's because our dreams are a bit of a in-between fiction and reality. There's something about them kind of felt like maybe he'd have access to us there, even though he's not real, because dreams aren't real. And then, of course, the franchise went meta and blurred that line even further. So Freddy's he's scary. And that's why I like him.
I completely agree. In addition to scary, I think he's probably, if not the most, one certainly of the most intelligent of the horror icons in terms of the way that he's portrayed. I mean, you have, Michael Myers, who doesn't really speak and doesn't seem, isn't really shown as being exceptionally bright. Kind of same thing with Jason Voorhees and, some of the others. But Freddy is very quick thinking, sharp witted. And, I think that makes him even more dangerous because he's just very cunning. And so I think that adds an extra layer of terror to his persona, for me at least.
And making him extra relatable. What was your first engagement with this franchise? Was it the first film or was it a different entry?
You know what? I think it might have actually been Freddy's Dead, believe it or not.
Whoa,
Yeah,
auspicious.
I think I'd never seen an Elm Street film. And, I was just excited to check one out because it had been kind of like forbidden fruit when I was younger. My parents were very anti-horror and particularly anti-Freddy, I think because he had so much media attention because of Freddy Mania, and I was alive in the 80s and the early 90s when it was really kind of going on. I, didn't get to see it until I was a little older, like a teenager. And I just grabbed the first Nightmare on Elm Street film that I saw at the video store, and it was Freddy's Dead. And I don't know. I mean, it didn't put me off of the franchise, that's for sure. I think it gave me an idea of, how scary the idea could be and an idea of the potential, and made me very curious to check out the other films, which of course I, soon did. How about you? What was your entry point?
I think it's one of the rare franchises where I did start off with the first one. I think it was one that I was most wary about checking out when I was young. It was just like, I think I was even like scared of like seeing the image of him on the box. Like I was really nervous that it was going to be too much for me. And then I watched the first one and it was scary, but I think I realized I had, I could handle it. And then I went through them, I think, basically in order. But yeah, it was the first one, and I think it really blew my mind. It's a really artfully done film, even from that very opening shot. There's something, thoughtful and elegant about that first movie that really reeled me in.
Elegant is a great word to describe that film. It is very true. It is a lot more cerebral than like a Friday the 13th film. I think there's a lot more kind of psychology behind the character and behind all of the characters, really.
Yep.
And I just think there's a little bit more of well, not a little bit. I think there's a lot more of a story there than you see with maybe your typical slasher film.
Mhm.
I think it's pretty incredible.
Says something about Wes Craven. He's given us some of the more clever, more intelligent entries into the canon, and we miss him and we love him. Um,
Absolutely.
Other than the first one, what would you say your favorite entry in this franchise would be?
It's actually even almost tied for first place with the first one is New Nightmare for me. Like you said, blurred the lines, and I think it's probably even scarier than the first because it in many ways, the first one was just a movie, this is real life,
Yeah.
and it kind of blurs that, fantasy and reality line. The actors and actresses are using their real names playing themselves, and they still can't escape Freddy, and that, I mean, that's real genius to me.
Very genius. Very, very smart. And I think they were aware that people were really afraid of Freddy. This was before the internet was super mainstream. This was before I think we had access to a lot of behind the scenes content. And so there was something about Freddy in the schoolyard or just in our minds that, I don't know, we were a little nervous that he could have access to us. So then them really erasing that line and making it hella meta, it's kind of a rotten genius move. And it is scary for sure.
That is one of the few horror movies that still kind of rattles me. The Strangers is one of them. I think just because
Yeah.
it's so grounded in reality, with the home invasion angle,
Yep.
and New Nightmare is another one because it feels like all bets are off. The stakes are sky high, and Freddy is so evil that he can't be confined to a screenplay or a feature film. Like he's basically like oozing his way out of the dream realm, the fantasy realm into the real world, and that's I mean that's quite a trip.
And it's just like hella creative and interesting. For me, hmm, I don't know if I'm just being like a pretentious little prick and not picking the third one because the third one is so incredible. But there's just something tonally about Dream Master that summarizes what I like about this franchise, and it's not necessarily when it's hitting its mark. There's something comforting about these movies when they're not necessarily succeeding. And I think the fourth film really balances scary, grotesque, and like impressive with a lot more camp and being a little bit dodgier and being unrelentlessly 80s. So there's something really fun about that fourth film. And I think Alice is a bit of an underappreciated heroine. And
Yeah,
we should talk about her a little bit more.
I think
Just a
that
little.
the fourth film really just, if I'm not mistaken, kind of picks up directly where the third left off, and I think
Yeah.
that's kind of exciting because it sort of starts with momentum, so to speak.
Mhm. And I also like a middle trilogy, and I think Friday does this at one point too, where it's just like smack dab in the
Oh,
franchise.
with Tommy Jarvis, right? There's like
Yeah, exactly. The Tommy Jarvis trilogy, which is what, 4, 5, and 6?
yes, because
Yeah,
he was the carry through in
yeah.
the fifth film.
Yes. And boy, was he a hottie in number 5. Gotta pay respects to that guy. Yeah, and then the middle trilogy for Nightmare was 3, 4, 5. And I just
Uh-huh.
think that's so, like, I don't know, lack of a better word, random, and I like it.
I like it too. It's yeah, it's something that I don't know if we see as much anymore because I'm trying to think of a more modern franchise that's done that,
But they
and
keep rebooting, they keep starting fresh and erasing history, and so it's kinda hard to do anymore.
right, that's a
Although I
great
guess these new Halloween films are a standalone late franchise trilogy, but does it count if it's a reboot? I don't know.
it's become so difficult to sort of differentiate at this point that I don't know if I have a clear answer on that.
At the end of the day, I'm always just a little bit grateful that we're getting some of these legacy sequels, no matter how they're presented.
For sure, I agree, and sometimes it works really well. Do you remember? God, to tell you the truth, I don't even remember what it's called, but the Leprechaun reboot,
Origins?
maybe was it didn't have Warwick Davis in it,
Yeah, it was like
and
a wrestler or something.
yeah, but wasn't that actually good? Like, am I remembering that? Am I
I
remembering
don't
the
think
right
I
one?
saw it.
Pull it
There
up
may have
really.
been Origins and then just Leprechaun, but this is one of the franchises that I don't have I don't have a real firm handle on. Sooner or later we'll be seeing Fred again.
Well, look what happened with Halloween, though. Um,
It worked out.
yeah.
I mean, I'd argue that it worked out.
No, I would argue that it worked out too. I just sometimes the rights being up for grabs can be interesting because it, if
Mhm.
the studio that owns the rights can't get their act together, sometimes
Yeah.
something gets disrupted, and then
Mhm.
next thing you know, there's a fresh set of eyes with a fresh perspective, and as much as maybe we hate to see that, it can also sometimes be the best thing that could happen.
Well, we were talking about this with Hellraiser a couple months ago, how that poor franchise was like suffering in with all of these like $300,000 sequels because no one knew what to do with it. And finally, it's getting its big budget follow ups. Friday the 13th, of course, being the most infamous of all the cases just because of the legal issues there. Tyler, would you mind if I gave a bit of history on Freddy's Dead
Please do.
just for a little context? So, Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare, also sometimes known as Nightmare on Elm Street 6, The Final Nightmare, kind of like that more, is a 1991 entry in the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, sixth in canon. It was released on September 13th, 1991. It made about 35 million bucks here on this side of the pond. It only had a budget of 10 million, so it really made its money and then some. I believe it was a better success than the movie that came before it, number 5, but it was super duper panned by critics upon release. So this movie stars a number of people, including Lisa Zane, Robert Englund, Breckin Meyer, and there were quite a few notable cameos of like big celebs. We've got Johnny Depp, Roseanne Barr, Tom Arnold, and even Alice Cooper shows up. Something that I love about it is that Iggy Pop sings the title song, which plays over the end. Let's get into some of our thoughts and our feelings and our emotions about this film. I don't think I
Sure.
ever realized that it was like full on camp until my rewatch today. Like I think I knew kinda, but I didn't like that's what they were going for. Like they wanted to do the John Waters thing. Clearly, I don't know how successful that they managed to do that, but that's clearly the way they were going, right?
Oh, absolutely.
It would make sense because Rachel Taylor, who directed this entry, had been working with New Line since the very beginning. And before they tackled A Nightmare on Elm Street, they had worked with John Waters.
Uh-huh.
So she kind of had a history a little bit with John Waters and clearly sort of got what he was doing. So
Mhm.
it's kind of cool to see the influence on this film. Kind of weird. Doesn't look great. I feel like it kind of has like a TV kind of X-Files look to it. How did you feel the aesthetics of this film turned out?
That's a really good call. It does have kind of a cheaper, lower budget feel to it, particularly in some of the more what's the word that I'm looking for? Ambitious
Mm.
sequences.
Yeah.
Like the animated video game sequence is just so poorly realized. Like it looks like something that a wedding videographer would make, like in
Yeah.
1990. I mean, it's that bad.
Pretty bad. Pretty bad. But also in some moments, like, I don't know. This time around I definitely gave it more of a pass. Like the really infamous and silly Breckin Meyer sequence where Freddy sort of absorbs him into to the TV and then they like play video games together. I
Oh,
remember
that's
that being
exactly what I was talking about.
is that what you're talking about? I
Yeah.
remember that being really appalling on my first few views. But today I don't know, I enjoyed it. It made me laugh. It was stupid, but I don't know. I had a good time with it.
There's definitely pieces of the film that I can appreciate.
Yeah, it's in on the joke. It's meta. It's high camp. It's kind of John Waters, but at the same time, the writing atrocious.
Yes.
Like go to jail. I'm calling the cops. Bad. And I have written down some of these lines. Can I share with you
I would
some? And
love.
I'm sure these are infamous. Everyone's going to know what I'm about to bring up. But I was like, whoa, go to writing school. So there's the scene where this character is approaching this like bloodied person in the corner of a room, and it's supposed to be scary, and he holds his shoulder, and then it turns around and it's him, and he says to himself, "Free me, you idiot, I'm your fucking memory." And it's so dumb. It's like, what do you mean? What? Also, like, A, cringy, and B, what are you talking about? What does that like? I'm confused.
Okay, so while we're talking about WTF moments, did you notice about 20 minutes in the guy at the fair going in circles on the bumper cars and sort of moaning?
Of course.
Because it
Yes.
seemed like something you would notice and appreciate in your way that you appreciate things. So I thought of
Thank
you.
you. I really appreciate that. I do think he was tonally in line with the teacher that never stops teaching.
Yes.
Those like sad adults that are just like, I don't know, really like they're just like trying to figure it out after Freddy killed all their kids.
Right.
Speaking of them, my favorite cameo, controversial in the whole movie, has got to be Roseanne and Tom Arnold. They're so funny. She's like, I want my children, and he's like, no, because he'll come back. It's so funny. I
Yes.
think they pulled it off.
That was definitely high camp. And I think that maybe that was one of the moments where you could see the Waters influence the most.
Yes,
Because they feel like, when you initially said John Waters, it didn't necessarily click for me right away, but I kind of marinated on it. And I think that their cameo feels like it could have come out of, like Pink Flamingos or something. I mean, it feels
hell yeah.
well, just about any John Waters film, but just to name one.
Yeah.
I think that that was very, very high camp, and
Through the roof.
Definitely one of the places where I can see what you're talking about.
And obviously Twin Peaks was playing an influence on this film too, to the point where he actually goes like, whoa, like this place is so, I don't know what the line is, but they literally reference Twin Peaks, which is like bad writing. It's also 1991. Like, don't literally say Twin Peaks in this movie. That's like gauche as hell.
I
But
think
funny.
this movie is very much a product of its time.
Yeah.
The wardrobe, in particular, the hairstyles, the teenage cast, the way that they just kind of mope around and look like they're going to a Pearl Jam concert. Like, it could not possibly be, anything other than 1991. I mean, it's pretty much you know give or take a year or two. It's pretty easy to identify exactly when it's from. And I don't know, I guess sometimes that can be okay. Like, sometimes it can be charming, if we look back on the era fondly, eventually.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's a huge gamble. I would much rather see something like the original, so much more timeless.
Super
It plays
timeless. Yeah.
very well. You don't watch it and say, oh God, this is 1984. Like, you watch it and it kind of takes you out of that. And
Yeah.
the wardrobe, the hairstyles, everything are not timeless, but they're a lot more classic looking than what we saw in
Mhm.
Freddy's Dead. And I think that's one of many reasons that it just hasn't aged very
Suffers.
well.
Yeah.
It wasn't very well received, but then it's almost like it got even worse as it aged.
We're definitely not kind. History was not kind on Freddy's Dead, but I have a feeling after watching it now with 2022 eyes that people are going to come around to it soon. I
People
think,
do with almost everything. People have come
yeah.
around to Friday the 13th 5, warm up
Mm-hmm.
to.
They do.
People
Yeah.
warm up to, and Freddy's Dead absolutely has its defenders. Elise Wax, former Dread Central editor, if I'm not
Mhm.
mistaken, is actually a fan, and she's someone who I respect very much. So,
Cool.
I when I watched it, I tried to sort of look for, maybe what she sees in it, because like I said, I respect her, and on that same note, I did find more to like about it this time than I ever have before.
Me too. Definitely me too. And I think, well, the expectations were on the ground, but yeah, it was more fun than I've ever had with it before, and I think I kind of got it in a way that I've never really got it before. And while
Sure.
I don't think it succeeded, I think this time I was on the same page as Freddy's Dead more than I've ever been before.
Yeah.
Although I will say the use of sexual trauma in this film is like terrible, really, really messy, and kind of brings it back from the point. It kind of pushes it to the point of no return a little bit.
I agree. That's another element that hasn't aged well. People probably didn't necessarily bat an eye when it came out,
Yep.
but I think we're a lot more evolved, after, what has it been, 31 years since it came out?
Wow.
Yeah, isn't that right? Because it's 2022 and the film came out in 91, if I'm not
Yep.
mistaken.
Yeah. And I think at the time it was like edgy to do some of the sexual trauma stuff as
Yes.
horror, but
Yes.
now it just comes across as like, ew.
Well, we're a little more informed, and I think we
Yeah.
realize,
Yeah.
some of the ramifications of sort of using something like that for entertainment value. The way that it,
Yeah.
the
And
way that it
maybe it had good
looks.
intentions, like, and I yeah, it's complicated.
Yeah,
Putting the lead though in like that little girl dress and the pigtails was like, guys, like, no, no, bad. But yes, it's a different time, and you got to look at it with that lens. Uh, so one of the scariest scenes for me in this is Carlos's death, because I don't know, I have an aversion to like ear horror, like putting something in like when the lady or his mom, I guess, had that really long ear. What am I trying to
with a
say?
Q-tip
The
or
really long Q-tip. Oh Lord, no, that's a no from me.
I agree. I put the same thing in my notes. I just said that I find that scene to be by far the most disturbing, but also, the scariest and the grossest, and so many other things
Maybe the most
uh,
effective
by
in terms
far.
of
And
fear.
you probably already know this because you're pretty studious with your research, but I believe that Robert Englund actually told Dread Central once that that is his favorite kill in the totality of the franchise.
Really, I
Yeah,
love that that was to Dread Central. I
I
didn't know
know.
that, and that's super cool.
Yeah.
It's creative, it's really disturbing, and it's like visceral. It's like, no, stop. Oh God, not the ear.
Yeah, it's I have a thing with like I can barely watch The Dentist. I have to almost like watch it through, my the
Yeah.
cracks of my fingers.
Oh,
And I
yeah,
feel
we all.
this
Yeah.
I feel the same way about that scene in Freddy's Dead for sure.
Ugh. I don't want to get too deep into it, but like, did you ever have like scary dental experiences as a kid that could
Yes,
have
I grew
been
up in
made
a
that
small
so?
town, and
Oh,
our dentist was super rough. He used to call his like younger patients knothead or like
oh,
what God he used to. He used to like have all kinds of derogatory names that he would call children, and then
oh
he'd
my
like
God.
rough up your mouth and kick you out and tell you to go home. I mean, it was pretty bad. And
Oh,
so
I'm so sorry.
I went to a dentist in a neighboring city, and he actually told me, and I don't think he was kidding, that when he went to dental school, they didn't have Novocaine. So
Oh, geez, Louise. Yeah, I had a dental visit last week, and there were needles involved. As scary as mouth needles are, I am grateful. I am
yeah,
grateful. Yeah. Ugh, yeah. And I think so. I understand why that would be the case for you in like dental horror. I had like a lot of ear infections as a kid growing up, so ears are like a ongoing theme in my life. That's got to be why this is like too much to handle for me, and I actually kind of like that.
good, good.
Yeah, yeah.
I had a lot of ear infections as a kid as well.
Me too. Yeah.
Maybe it's just part of like your body developing. I think it's not something that adults generally get,
Mm-hmm.
but yes, I think that for anyone that struggled with that growing up, that certainly has the potential to be a major trigger.
Oh, hell yeah. And considering how not scary this movie is, it's nice every once in a while for it to kind of get me.
Absolutely, I agree.
Do you have any final thoughts, concerns, feelings about Freddy's Dead before I sort of usher us into a new era?
I just wonder who the hairstylist was on this film because Tom Arnold, Breckin Meyer, and Mrs. Tom Arnold, as she's credited, I believe, all have bad hair. This was not a good movie for hair. Did you pick
I
up on that?
didn't notice, but I did notice Brecken's hair being not ideal.
Oh, very much so.
Not ideal. Actually, it would be cute if it wasn't for the rat tail. IMO.
Yeah, yeah. He ditched the rat tail, a year or two later,
Okay.
because not too long after that, he appeared in Clueless and The Craft, and the stuff that he's really well known for.
Mm-hmm. I know it's always funny seeing him in this because it's right before he got big,
Right.
and he's just like a little younger than he was when he sort of made it. So it's like it's kind of funny to see him. And I don't know if there were that. Do we get that many other teen stars other than Johnny Depp out of this franchise that sort of had a life outside of these films?
Yeah, one of the Arquette sisters.
Oh, of course, Patricia.
Yes, thank you. I always confuse their names, so that's why I
Yeah,
just
there's so
referred
many
to you as one
archetypes
of
in this
them.
world. And we love them all, but there's many of them. And I guess Monica Keena is an iconic teen icon. Said that word twice. From Freddy vs. Jason. I love she talked about it a lot in her press cycle that she like is terrified of Freddy Krueger. Like she had like a pathological fear of Freddy as a kid, like a lot of people do. It's just funny to think about someone like that actually having to film one of these movies.
I love that. Catherine Isabel was also in Freddy vs. Jason, and she's, a
Yes.
pretty big star in her own right, and was, going into Freddy vs. Jason because I believe she already done Ginger Snaps and,
Yeah.
had a couple of other noteworthy credits under her belt at that point.
I'm such a big fan of hers and the Ginger Snaps movies because I'm Canadian and it's in the contract.
I've interviewed her a couple of times, and she seems like such a nice, like down to earth, funny person.
So, as we were saying, and we're going to continue talking about, Freddy's Dead wasn't necessarily the way that New Line was going to go for the sixth A Nightmare on Elm Street film. They had also tapped into a young emerging filmmaker by the name of Peter Jackson, who had just made a couple of, let's say, attention grabbing indie horror films. So, before we get into what his A Nightmare on Elm Street film was going to look like, I was wondering if you'd mind if I give a little bit of history on the man, the legend, Peter Jackson.
Oh, please do.
So, most of you are well aware, Peter Jackson is a filmmaker from New Zealand, best known, I'd say, for the Lord of the Rings trilogy and I guess the Hobbit trilogy as well. But she's got some other very notable works under her belt. One of my favorite movies of all time, 1994's Heavenly Creatures. So one of my favorite movies ever, Heavenly Creatures, based on a real life crime, stars Kate Winslet and Melanie Linsky. And she is on that show with Christina Ricci, Yellow Jackets, and I love it.
I still have to check it out. That's why I probably didn't know who you were talking about.
Oh yeah, I definitely recommend Yellow Jackets. Pure 90s horror energy. So
Sounds
definitely one to check
right
out.
up my alley.
I had a feeling. Yeah. So he did Lord of the Rings. We talked about that already. Hobbits. Talked about that. Heavenly Creatures, a big one for me. The Frighteners from 1996. I love that movie. He did the 2005 King Kong. And also more recently, the 2021 Beatles documentary, Get Back, which I hear good things about, but I have not seen. This dude is the third highest grossing film director of all time, which is an insane accomplishment. And I'm guessing The Lord of the Rings had something to do with it. His first film was Bad Taste. So this is considered to be maybe one of the goriest movies of all time. Super, super cult, hyper indie, tiny budget that he made over a series of like 4 or 5 years with free actors that were his friends. And then at the Cannes Film Festival in 1987, it blew up, sold basically in every country on the planet, and really put him on the map. After that, he made a film called Meet the Feebles that sort of continued his reign of terror, but this time with like a Muppet style musical. And in 1990 was about the time that he was tapped by New Line Cinema to come up with a concept, potentially. He was tapped to write The Dream Lover with his writing partner at the time, Danny Mulheron. So Nightmare 5 failed to perform at the box office in the way that New Line Cinema was hoping that it would. And because of this, they decided that they really weren't going to shake things up with a sixth film. So this is why they decided to connect with a hot young filmmaker off of Bad Taste, who was getting all of this buzz. And they also got a concept from Rachel Taylor and her writing partner, who had been working on this franchise for a really long time. So what I'm about to get into, I've recounted from the book Peter Jackson, From Prince of Splatter to Lord of the Rings by author Ian Pryor. So according to Ian Pryor, Jackson's first Hollywood paycheck actually came from New Line Cinema, who paid him to come up with a concept for Nightmare on Elm Street Part 6. The reason why they were interested in him was because of Bad Taste, which had caught the attention of all sorts of distributors when it came out, specifically because it showed that Jackson was able to work with a small budget, but yet produce something really special and have a lot of charm and a lot of his own personality. There was a script reader at New Line Cinema by the name of Mark Odesky. And he was the one that sort of noticed Peter Jackson for the first time. And he wanted to actually distribute his films through New Line. And while that never happened, New Line did sort of get his eye on him. And eventually, like 10 years later, they would create the Lord of the Rings trilogy that really like put Peter Jackson as the biggest Hollywood director of all time. So it all kind of started with A Nightmare on Elm Street, which is pretty interesting. So Jackson and Mulheron's script was really different from what the franchise was used to seeing, because it took Freddy and it made him the victim and it made him vulnerable. So one of the interesting angles that they took was that Freddy had lost all of his power in the dream world. He wasn't able to hurt anyone anymore, to the extent where kids from Springwood were knocking themselves out with drugs so that they could go into the dream world and beat him up and harass him and sort of like attack him together. It became a bit of a sport for the teens of Springwood, which is interesting because he for so long was terrorizing the teenagers of this town, and now the tables have turned, which is, it wouldn't be A Nightmare on Elm Street if the teens didn't get their comeuppance. And because some of these teens took it too far, Freddy, through the luck of God, was able to get one of them, kills one of these kids, and then as sort of an effect from there, slowly but surely builds his power, regains his strength, and starts terrorizing Elm Street once again. The film's hero is a policeman who suffers from a coma and is in the dream world where he's vulnerable to Freddy Krueger. So according to author Ian Pryor, the climax of this film, once again, was the destruction of Freddy Krueger. So the New Line Cinema liked the script. They thought it was an interesting take. No one really knows why it didn't take off. To this day, there's not a lot of information about why they went ahead with Taylor's concept over Peter Jackson's. If I was going to wildly speculate, I would say it might have something to do with the fact that Taylor had gained such an amazing relationship with Bob Shea and New Line Cinema over a decade of actually working on these films and acquainting herself with every artist that was coming in the door. So it would make sense that they would give her a chance to actually make one of these movies. And it's pretty damn cool that we have a Nightmare on Elm Street film from a woman. We don't get that very often with any of our other franchises. Tyler, is there any other legacy franchise that we can think of that has an entry directed by a woman?
I feel like something might come to me at some point.
Yeah, me too, but
and I'll interrupt and bring it up, but I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
Of course.
And I think you might be onto something with what you were just saying, how she ended up at the helm. That's discussed a little bit, and if you've probably seen it, the Never Sleep Again documentary.
I have, yeah.
They kind of dive into, how exactly she impressively landed that role at a time where, for every 100 male directors, there was maybe one female, or, at least that's what it seems looking back. So yes, I think you're absolutely right. She did develop a close relationship with New Line, and I believe worked on Nightmare on Elm Street films pretty much from the get-go.
I think so too,
if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think she was even. I haven't seen Never Sleep Again in a little while, but I think that's where I learned. I think she may have even started off as a production assistant.
I think you're right.
Yeah, and maybe became. I think I might recall them saying she was a location scout, but that might be talking out of my butt. And eventually became a producer, and eventually became a director, which is really cool. And she's went on to direct other interesting things, and in recent years has even directed YA horror for Netflix. So she's had a really amazing career.
Absolutely.
But unfortunately, yes. What were you going to say?
I guess we wouldn't really consider it a franchise, but I believe both Pet Sematary films were helmed by Mary Lambert, I think, is Pet Sematary.
Yes.
Named Mary, and also that female film directors were so rare, rare in the 80s and 90s, really into the 2010s and beyond.
Mhm.
That sometimes it makes it easy to transpose, but in no way, I don't think does either one of us mean to
No, of course
belittle
not.
or minimize their incredible contributions to the cinematic universe and
Definitely.
to the various cinematic universes and to the horror genre.
And I think she also directed Tank Girl, which personally
Yeah,
I
with
love.
Lori Petty, that is such a wild movie, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And you kind of see the Freddy's Dead history in that movie, but I think it pulls it off a little better than Freddy's Dead did.
You definitely couldn't have done Tank Girl without Lori Petty. Can you imagine another actress, taking that on?
Absolutely not. If you had to, who would it be?
I, I'm at a loss, honestly.
It has to be Lori.
What about Kate McKinnon though?
Okay, I think it's always a bit of a cheat with Kate McKinnon because she could
Because she
just do
can do
anybody.
anything.
Yeah, she could just like impersonate literally anything. So
Yeah,
like, of course she can play Carol Baskin. You know what I mean? Like,
right. And
like,
play her,
yeah.
she does. Have you watched
No,
that? I don't know if you which.
Joe versus Carol. I
Yeah,
have
is it?
not.
Do you have Peacock in Canada?
I don't, but I'm sure it's on something that we've got here.
Okay.
Oh,
It's
actually, maybe we do. Don't quote me, guys. Don't quote me.
it's pretty wild, just the way that she kind of became Carol Baskin. Like I feel like I don't know where Kate McKinnon like stops and Carol
Hmm.
Baskin starts, and vice versa.
I love that. Also, I'm not over that whole saga. I think some people may have kind of moved past the Joe Exotic saga, but I cannot wait to watch that personally. Also, John Cameron Mitchell, am I saying that right?
Uh huh. From
What a,
Hedwig.
what a gay hero. What a gay hero. No, what a
Indeed.
gay hero.
Indeed, and really, 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 both leads,
Yeah.
just incredibly impressive. How they really immersed themselves, down to the slightest tick or mannerism, and became the people that they're playing. And
I
John
cannot wait to. I
Cameron
actually didn't realize it was out, to be honest with you.
on Peacock in the States it is. I couldn't say for sure, where you would find it up north, but
But we will, and we will report back. So I think that might be it for me in terms of what we were supposed to see with the Dream Lover. Although I do want to speculate a little bit about why it was called that, because it could mean so many things. It could mean someone that loves to dream. It could be a a romantic interest for Freddy Krueger, which would be interesting. I would love to see a lady Freddy Krueger at some point. I don't know how you're going to do that, but I'd like to see it. If you had to take a wild guess, if you had to take a wild stab in the dark, what do you think the Dream Lover is referring to?
I mean, I would have to assume there's some kind of like romance or sexual tryst or something that takes place in the dream world, because it
Yeah.
I feel like for it to be about someone that loved to dream
Doesn't make any sense.
would be a little peculiar. Certainly, it could mean that, and maybe Peter Jackson had something up his sleeve that I'm not aware of. But I
Well,
suspect that it
Freddy
was
loves
some
dreams
kind of
because he can kill in them.
some kind of intimate relationship that it was referencing. Is always how I've taken it.
I think so too. It also really falls in line with, Dream Child, Dream Master,
Dream Warriors.
Dream Warriors. It gives you a role in the dreams. So I bet you money if there was a Dream Lover that was like a female lead that was like, I don't know, supposed to be linked up with him in some way. I think it would be like a Bride of Frankenstein kind of a scenario where she's not into it, but he's got his he's got his terrible ideas. So I'd like to know what it meant personally.
Me too. Well, next week maybe we can bring Peter Jackson on, and we can say, Pete,
Hey, Pete, what's up? What,
tell
what
us
did you
about it.
mean? Come on, Pete. Actually, he's sitting right here, but he's looking at me, and he doesn't want to. He doesn't want to talk about it. He's giving me like the signal. So,
What a
um, I'll-
bitch.
I know. I'll talk to him later. Um, so this leads us, you and I, into the realm of conclusions, and you may know that you and I have a lot of sway in this industry. So
Oh,
if we
certainly.
just,
We're
oh yeah,
movers. We're shakers.
and we're other things too.
Candlestick
So
makers.
I was trying to think of something and I got nothing. I was like confetti bakers, and I was like, that's not a thing. Um, It's up to us to
For
decide.
trying, though.
Thank you. It's up to us to decide if Peter Jackson's ever going to get to make a Nightmare on Elm Street project. Do you think it's ever in the history of mankind possible that Peter Jackson will revisit a Nightmare on Elm Street, or is it absolutely just impossible?
I
Never
don't
going to
think
happen. Get
anything's
over it.
impossible. I think what might have to happen is his mainstream career would have to slow down a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I think that, I mean, Elm Street films have a budget of maybe like 5 to 20 million,
Yep.
range, and a Peter Jackson film has a budget of like
300
yeah,
to
so
8
so I just
trillion.
kind of feel like where he's at in his career, he would probably have to not fall from grace at all, but I think he would have to probably have, less successful box office returns to ever go back there. But like you said, it's up to us. So
Yeah, it's up to us. It's up to you and I.
so if it were up to us, totally.
Yeah, I think so too. Maybe he's got a lot of debt. Maybe he's buying a lot of haunted castles like Nick Cage, and he has to do something to pay it off. So this could be a good way to start.
Certainly, and I think that it would be pretty incredible. I mean, he really is a powerhouse talent with such originality, such creativity, such great ideas. That I mean, I think the sixth film would have been such a different beast were he at the helm, and particularly had he co-written, because I feel like there's only so much you could do with the Freddy's Dead script. But
Yeah, yeah, I agree completely. Are you still there?
oh, I'm still here. I was just
good.
trying not to cut you off, which I tend to do.
I know I'm the king of cutting people off. We just have to accept the fact that I'll edit it out and make it sound cute. I agree. I kind of wish we could have seen it, but I personally don't think it's ever going to happen, and that's okay. My more important question for us, the one that's really weighing on me, that I really would like an answer for, is what's next for A Nightmare on Elm Street? Is it going to be a movie? Is it going to be a series? Is it going to be nothing ever
I hope to
again?
God it's not a series. This might make me like, your most hated guest ever, but
Uh-oh.
I
Uh-oh.
really don't always love, when a beloved franchise or film is turned into episodic television. Like
Well, it never
sometimes it can be
works.
really great, but I mean, I just didn't really vibe with I Know What You Did Last Summer.
I was going to bring it up. I was going to say what you didn't like. I Know What You Did Last Summer.
I really love some of the leads for that. I interviewed two of the female leads, and they were such sweethearts. They were so fun to talk to. They were both great in the series, but just as a whole, it didn't really win me over. And
I agree.
that's
a lot of
not
talent,
the first
for
time
sure.
that's happened for me. I feel like, as great as TV has gotten, thanks to shows like The Sopranos and Breaking Bad that have showed that, more is less sometimes, 8 episodes or 12 or 13, you can tell a much better story, and it doesn't have to be just, solely to sell advertising. You can have creative freedom with television, but even still, trying to take something that was intended to be 90 minutes and turning it into 9 hours
It doesn't
doesn't
work.
always work for me.
No.
So I really hope that it's not television, because it is my favorite horror franchise and something that I love and cherish so much. Not that, turning it into TV would tarnish what we already have, but it just, I would rather see that, that
you want an event. You want
channeled into another feature. I think that is the best way to go.
Totally agree.
But mark my words, we'll probably have a series at some point. And it's just kind of inevitable.
Well, let's get a reboot going of Freddy's Nightmares, hun. I'd like to see that, like, super crappy
I would rather
Tales
see
from the Crypt vibe.
I would rather see Friday the 13th, the series, rebooted. And that's another Elise Wax reference, because she is the foremost authority on that. She quite literally wrote the book on it. And she's the only person I know that loves that show more than I do.
I've actually never been able to find it. Easily in Canada. So.
Well, Josh, it's available as a Region 1 DVD, which Canada is Region 1. So you could just, you could hop on eBay and pick it up for $20, I bet.
Okay. Without lifting a finger, I haven't been able to find it. You know what I mean? Without having to put any money or effort into it. You know what I mean? Without actually even having to Google it. I've never really tried, if I'm going to be fully honest with you. But one of these days I'd like to. It kind of sounds like a bit of a Needful Things vibe, and that's That wins me over.
Yeah, here it is on eBay for $26.99. Seasons 1 through 3, $26.99 free shipping. You'd probably have to pay a little bit of a premium to get it shipped to Canada, but
Unless it's a double feature with Freddy's Nightmares, which never was on DVD, I'm not buying it. So send it back.
I really want you to, though. It's actually enjoyable. It's very dark.
Oh.
David Cronenberg directed several episodes of it.
Oh, cool.
There's an episode not directed by David Cronenberg that's pretty great body horror. It's just very dark, sinister. It's terribly cheaply made. It's not like must-see TV, but there's something really special about it nonetheless.
Calling it cheaply made and not must-see TV is truly how you won me over. So I'm not kidding. That's how you get to my heart.
I mean, that's all truth. Like, it is very cheaply made. It's probably about as cheaply made as Freddy's Nightmares.
With a little bit more integrity, I'm guessing.
And when I say not must see TV, I don't mean it's not good. I just mean it's not, it doesn't have the budget of, some of its contemporaries from that era, but they did a lot with a little. I feel like that's the best thing I could say about it, and the most accurate thing I could say about it. I mean,
I will watch this at some point.
Pretty good. It's far better than it should be for the budget that it had, and the fact that it has like not a thing to do with Friday the 13th, but it is the official television series of the Friday the 13th franchise.
Well, and I like that nobody's like, I don't know, maybe they are, but people don't seem that mad about it in the way that they were with Halloween 3. So
I think it's because no one saw it. I mean, it was a syndicated series that like not every local network had to carry, and it wasn't when it's
in like the early 90s, I'm guessing.
Yes, I believe so. And when a TV series is syndicated, the local affiliate can air it anytime they want. So they could air it at 2 a.m. on Saturday.
Yeah.
If they wanted,
which I'm sure is generally when it was there.
So there was no continuity between markets where you could say like, oh, Friday the 13th series is on right now. Let's check it out and compare notes with your friends. Like, it depended on where you live. So I think that was kind of a detriment. And it was sold in conjunction with one of the new Star Trek series. So it was pitched to local network affiliates as, if you want Star Trek DS9 or whatever that era was, you have to take Friday the 13th also.
That's so funny. God, I miss the 90s. What a perfect era.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you've sold me. I'd like to check it out. I'm looking for like comfort 90s crap.
It's very much that. If I just want to kind of wind down for the night, I love to pop on an episode of that and watch. You know what, Josh? Actually, season 1 aired in 1987, so it might have been 87, 88, 89, and possibly 90. So
that's way older than I was expecting.
Yeah, it was 87 through 90. I just looked it up. So it was 90s, but
barely.
Really it kind of had its heart in the 80s. And the best episodes, IMO, were contained within the first 2 seasons.
Well, then hopefully it's not going to be a TV show. Hopefully we're going to get this Nightmare on Elm Street film at some point. Did you hear that rumor? Not rumor, that Spectre Vision, aka Elijah Wood, sort of put his hat in the ring for a reboot, or at least, I don't know, or at least like mentioned it lightly in an interview or something. It came up in the convo.
I didn't. I'm sure we reported on it on Dread, and I just missed it. But
this is a few years already back.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Yeah.
So no, I hadn't heard that, but I would be very curious to see what he could do. I think he has a really good eye for what's scary, and I think he's kind of a creative powerhouse. I mean, he's multi-talented.
I wrote an article for Dread about 5 directors who I thought might be good to take on A Nightmare on Elm Street. Can I run them by you and get your opinion?
Oh yeah,
on
please
if
do.
any you agree with?
Please do.
So who did I got? I got Oz Perkins from Blackcoat's Daughter and Gretel and Hansel.
Okay.
Andre Orvidal from Autopsy of Jane Doe and Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. I've got Nia DaCosta, obviously Candyman. Ronnie Yu, that's got to be my favorite. And then Anna Lily Amapour from A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night to like maybe get some real scary Freddy back in the game. Is there anyone in there that you connect with?
I would be happy to see any of those people step in, but Andre, how do you say his last name?
Orvidal?
Okay, so that, I mean, I loved scary stories to tell in the dark.
Me too.
I think that to me was just such a great showcase of his talent, that it would make me, and also to show that he can do something that's both like mainstream and marketable, and has a PG-13 rating but still scares the shit out of you.
Yep.
So for me, not by no means am I saying I want a PG-13 Elm Street, but what I am saying is that he knows how to walk the line between marketable and still scary and exciting.
Yep.
And so I feel like that's someone that knows how to work within the studio system, but still present something that's really like enjoyable to consume. And so that might be my top pick out of those, but I would love to see any one of those ultra talented creators take a stab.
And I hope that someone ultra talented does. I'd be very interested and honestly, like, really waiting for some kind of announcement.
I think it's really going to need to be someone young, up and coming,
Yeah.
in the way that, like, who was it? Radio Silence that did the Scream, the Scream 2022.
Yeah.
And they haven't been around forever. They've still got, kind of some of their best ideas in them, I think. And that's probably what we need, is like a Fede Alvarez, for example, with Evil Dead, who, was kind of this newcomer that said, let's shake things up. Let's not have an Ash character.
Killed it.
He
Blew it
really,
out of the park.
He really did. And I think that's what we need, is someone that's still kind of, got some of their best ideas within them, to take a fresh look at it and say, let's shake it up and do all these things different and subvert expectations. But here's how we'll tie it all together and, make it something that people are going to go crazy for. Because if we continue to tap people that have, made 500 films, and are probably fresh out of ideas because they've, really kind of put their best work out there already, we may get something kind of tried and expected.
All right, Tyler, you've convinced me. I'll do it. I'll do it. All right, you've really convinced me. I'll put my ego aside and I'll direct a Nightmare on Elm Street movie. Fine.
Well, I appreciate that you would sink down. Is that you always just throw zany shit at the wall, to see what sticks. And most of the time it just lands, and it's like, damn, like, why didn't I think of that?
I really appreciate that. All you can do is follow your weirdo creative impulses, and maybe sometimes they work.
I think oftentimes for you they work, my friend. You are so like slow to ever take credit for anything. You're like, oh, it was a mistake that it worked. Haha, happy accident. But I mean,
it's true though, Tyler. Most of the time it is.
Well,
no,
I'm kidding. If you have a track record where it works way more often than it doesn't, then maybe it's not such a mistake.
You just gotta close your eyes and go with God. Tyler, if people wanted to find you, if they wanted to come for you and your family, how would they be able to do that? Where on the internet are you accessible?
Oh God, you are so funny, my friend. Thank you for asking. I love exposure, and I will gladly tell you where people can find me. I am on Twitter and Instagram as @funwithhorror, FUNWITHHORROR. And I am on Facebook at facebook.com/funwithhorror. I like to keep it easy with same username across the big three.
Got to do it. It's all part of that brand. And yeah, guys, follow Tyler because his writing is incredible and he's a super cool guy. Thank you so much for joining me again on Development Hell. And I know I'm going to have you back sooner than later, because I'll just abduct you, and it's up to me when that happens.
Oh, thank you so much. I've of guest hosting experiences I've had, this is certainly one of my most favorite, because we just have so much fun and we have a great natural chemistry. So,
definitely, it's so easy to talk to you.
If you want to, abduct me, just return me when you're done.
Thank you so much for listening to Development Hell. If you enjoy this podcast, then please do us a major favor of leaving us 5 stars and writing a positive review. It really makes all the difference in the world. We'll see you next week with a brand new episode of Development Hell.
Thank you for listening to the Dread Podcast Network.